各位朋友，大家好，欢迎来到天才儿童培养频道，我是郭万传教授。小孩子的成功就是我们人生的成功。今天我来跟大家介绍 Alphakids Level 23。我们来看这本书哈。
Alphakids Level 23, Book 3. Graeme Base, Writer and Illustrator. Interviewed by Eleanor Curtin. Photography by Ross Tonkin. Graeme Base, Writer and Illustrator. Interviewed by Eleanor Curtin. Photography by Ross Tonkin. I'm Graeme Base, and I'm a writer and an illustrator. I live in Melbourne, Australia, with my wife and children. My books are sold in many countries all over the world. People often ask me how I became an illustrator. I used to draw and write at school, and I wrote my first book when I was 8 years old. It was a book of monsters. I did all the illustrations, but I didn't get it published. After I left school, I studied art and design. Eventually, I began illustrating children's books that other people had written. I found that I wanted to make changes to these stories to make the words and pictures work better, so I decided to write and illustrate my own stories. It's hard to say where my ideas come from. They often arrive just when I'm in the middle of something, and it's very important that the ideas don't get away. I always write them down or draw a picture of them as soon as possible. Mostly, I love to draw animals. My stories are about fantastic things and events. They aren't real, but I use real animals as a reference to make the fantasy more convincing. My first really successful book was Animalia. I wanted to illustrate as many animals as I could. I also wanted to make a book with lots and lots of detail and things to discover. This was the sort of book I enjoyed as a child. I wrote Animalia using alliteration, where the words on a page usually begin with the same letter. I thought it would be a lot of fun for people to read aloud. I put the little boy in every picture to make people look closely at the pictures rather than rushed through from page to page. It's really a picture of me when I was young. I have written several other books. When I wrote The 11th Hour, I thought of the title first. I knew I wanted to write a mystery story with the clues hidden in the artwork. Everything in the story is based around the number 11. Everything would happen at 11 o'clock. The picture which took the longest to create was the feast. All that food took ages to get right. The sign of the seahorse was inspired by my first experience of scuba diving. I work in a studio at the top of my house. It has lots of windows because I need very good light. I prefer drawing to writing. In fact, I really began writing books so that I could have the fun of illustrating them. At some stage, I start to scribble. When I get the image that I want and I know what I want to do, I plan the illustrations in detail. My paintings are done on illustration board with watercolors and transparent inks. Using brushes, pencils, technical drawing pens, and a scalpel for scratching. I also use a special tool called an airbrush, which sprays paint onto the board. It is very handy. It helps me paint skies and mist and breath from horses' mouths. For the worst band in the universe, I made a small clay model of each character to see what it would look like. Then I made a larger model, also of clay. I made a plaster cast of this, and I filled it with latex and foam so it could be stretched and moved. After I'd made the models, I could move them into any position I wanted and then draw them. I could also photograph the models and scan them into my computer. Sometime in the future, I'll illustrate a whole book on computer. My only real hobby is playing music. Whenever I need a break from my illustration work, I pick up the guitar or play the piano. I'd love to work as a musician. I write a lot of music on guitar and keyboards and hope one day to make a record or maybe even write the music score for a film.
好，我们就介绍到这个地方。